The massive courtroom on Nova Station buzzed with tension as Captain Lehana walked through the towering doors. Her military boots echoed against the crystal floor, each step measured and proud. Above her, the dome ceiling showed the swirling colors of the Andromeda Nebula, but Hannah's focus remained straight ahead. In the observation deck, 12-year-old Kim Tai pressed his small hands against the reinforced glass. His mother looked so small down there, surrounded by alien delegates from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian representatives floated in their gravity bubbles, while the rock-like granite people sat motionless as statues. But all eyes were on the central judgment platform where Magistrate Kor waited. The Bloxian judge was a terrifying sight. His blue-scaled body stretched nearly 3 meters tall, with muscular arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Dozens of tentacles writhed round his head like angry snakes, and his 3 eyes glowed with an inner fire that made even the bravest soldiers uncomfortable. Behind him, holographic displays showed the contested planet Proxima 7, its green forests and blue oceans now scarred by massive mining operations. Captain Lehana of the Human Defense Corps. Kor's voice boomed through the chamber, each word dripping with contempt. You stand accused of attacking lawful Bloxian mining vessels and destroying valuable equipment worth millions of galactic credits. Hannah's translator earpiece crackled as she listened to the charges. Round her, floating camera drones captured every moment for broadcast across the galaxy. She could feel the weight of humanity's hopes on her shoulders. The evidence is clear. Kor continued, his tentacles dancing with excitement. Your fighter squadron destroyed 3 of our harvester ships and damaged our orbital platform. 17 Bloxian workers were hospitalized. You will now apologize for this unprovoked aggression and accept full responsibility. The courtroom fell silent. Tai held his breath as he watched his mother stand perfectly still. He had seen her face this expression before, when bullies at school picked on smaller kids. It was the look that said she would never back down from what was right. Magistrate Kor, Hannah's voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. Those mining ships were strip mining a protected nature preserve. The Galactic Environmental Treaty of 2387 specifically forbids industrial operations in such areas. Kor's eyes flashed brighter. The treaty contains exceptions for vital resource extraction. Proxima 7 contains rare deuterium crystals essential for starship fuel production. Essential enough to poison 3 rivers and destroy a forest that took 10,000 years to grow. Hannah shot back. Essential enough to ignore the fact that 500 human families lived in that preserve. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The human delegation exchanged worried glances while alien representatives whispered among themselves. Some species had faced similar situations with Bloxian mining operations on their worlds. You will apologize, Kor repeated, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of dominance. You will admit that your actions were wrong and illegal. Only then will this tribunal consider mercy. Hannah looked up at the observation deck where her son waited. Tai's young face was pressed against the glass, his dark eyes wide with fear and hope. She thought of all the children on Proxima 7 who had played in those poisoned streams, all the families forced to flee their homes when the mining machines arrived. I protected innocent people, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I defended families who couldn't defend themselves. I stopped the destruction of an irreplaceable ecosystem. She lifted her chin and looked directly into Kor's burning eyes. I will not apologize for doing what was right. The tentacles round Kor's head writhed faster, turning darker shades of blue. His claws scraped against the judgment platform as he leaned forward. You dare defy this tribunal. You dare refuse a direct order from a galactic magistrate. I dare to stand up for what's right. Hannah replied, even if it costs me everything. The silence stretched like a held breath. Even the floating camera drones seemed to hover motionless. waiting for the magistrate's response. In the observation deck, Ty could feel tears starting in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. His mother had taught him that courage meant doing the right thing even when you were scared. Cor's eyes blazed like red suns as he raised his ceremonial gavel. The ancient Bluxian weapon was carved from black stone and inscribed with symbols of justice, though justice seemed very far away in this moment. Then you will learn the price of defiance. He snarled, Captain Lehana, I sentence you to 20 years imprisonment in Frost Prison. You will serve your time in the maximum security wing with no possibility of early release. The gavel crashed down with the sound of thunder. Immediately, 6 armed security robots flanked Hannah, their blue energy restraints activating round her wrists. She didn't resist as they began to escort her away. But she turned one last time to look up at her son. Be strong, Ty, she called out, her voice carrying over the chaos erupting in the courtroom. Remember what I taught you about doing what's right. Mom. Ty's scream pierced through the noise as he banged on the observation deck glass. Mom, don't leave me. But the security robots were already leading Hannah through the exit portal toward the prison transpo. At Shep's, the last thing she heard was her son's voice calling her name, a sound that would echo in her heart through all the dark days ahead. The transport ship shuddered as it descended through Europa's thin atmosphere, its engine fighting against the brutal winds that never stopped, howling across the moon's frozen surface. Through the small porthole, Hannah watched the dark landscape rush past, covered in ice that hadn't melted in millions of years. In the distance, she could see the massive walls of Frost Prison rising like black teeth against the starless sky. The prison was built into a crater on Europa's dark side, where the sun never shone and temperatures dropped to minus 200 degrees. The walls were made of reinforced titanium steel, designed to keep the galaxy's most dangerous criminals locked away from civilization. But as Hannah would soon learn, the real danger came from the guards themselves. The Bluxian warden, Commander Vex, met the new rivals at the airlock. His blue scales gleamed under the harsh artificial lights, and his tentacles writhed with barely contained excitement as he looked over the human prisoners. Welcome to your new home, he hissed, his voice echoing through the metal corridors. Here, you will learn what happens to those who oppose Bluxian authority. The cold will be your constant companion, and despair will be your only friend. The human prisoners were led through a maze of corridors deeper into the prison complex. The air grew colder with each step, and their breath formed white clouds that froze instantly along the way. They passed cells holding alien inmates, most of whom had proper heating units and warm clothing. The contrast was obvious and cruel. Hannah's cell was a concrete box barely large enough for 3 people, with metal bunks bolted to the walls and a single small window that looked out onto the frozen waste. Eland, her cellmates were already there, waiting for her. Park Jin was a former colony administrator who had refused to sign mining contracts with Bluxian corporations. Osu had been a terraforming engineer who tried to protect water sources from contamination. They gave us 1 blanket each, Park Jin explained, holding up a piece of fabric so thin you could see through it. The alien prisoners get thermal suits and heating pads. The guards say it's because our crimes were against the natural order. The first night was the worst. The temperature in their cell dropped so low that their water rations froze solid. Hannah huddled between her new friends, sharing body heat and trying to stay awake. She had learned in military survival training that falling asleep in extreme cold could be fatal. We need to organize, she whispered to her cellmates as they shivered together. Individual survival won't work here. We need to work as a team. Over the following weeks, Hannah began to quietly build a network among the human prisoners during their 1 hour of daily exercise in the frozen courtyard. She taught them techniques she had learned in the military, how to conserve body heat by moving in specific ways, how to share resources efficiently, how to maintain morale when everything seemed hopeless. "We survived together" became their motto. Whispered from cell to cell during the long nights, the Bluxian guards seemed to enjoy making life harder for the humans. Guard Captain Zuff would walk through the human section carrying a portable heater, warming himself while the prisoners froze. Sometimes he would bring hot meals and eat them slowly in front of the starving humans, letting the smell torture them. "Your people are weak," he would taunt. "This is why you will always be slaves to superior species like mine." But Hannah noticed something the guards didn't expect. The humans were adapting faster than other species. Their bodies were learning to generate heat more efficiently. Their minds were staying sharp despite the harsh conditions. They were becoming stronger through their suffering. Meanwhile, millions of miles away on Earth, young Tai was facing his own struggles, living with his uncle Kim Woo in a small apartment in Seoul. He spent his days at school and his nights worrying about his mother. The other kids whispered about him being the son of a convicted criminal, and teachers looked at him with pity. But Tai had found an unexpected ally in his elderly neighbor, Nambo. The old man had once been a top computer programmer for the Galactic Communications Network before retiring to Earth. His apartment was filled with old computers, holographic displays, and communication equipment that most people thought was just junk. "Your mother is a hero," Bo told Tai one evening as they sat in his cluttered workshop. The old man's fingers danced across multiple keyboards simultaneously, accessing databases that most people didn't even know existed. "Heroes don't stay down forever. They inspire others to rise up." Bo had been quietly teaching Tai everything he knew about computer systems, hacking techniques, and galactic communication networks. The boy was a natural, absorbing information like a sponge and asking questions that impressed even the old expert. "Why are you helping me?" Tai asked one night as they worked on breaking into a low-level tribunal database. Bo smiled and pointed to a faded photograph on his wall. It showed a young woman in a Human Defense Corps uniform, standing proudly next to a newly constructed space station. "That's my daughter," he said softly. "She died defending a mining colony from raiders 20 years ago. Your mother reminds me of her. Same courage, same principles." He placed a gentle hand on Tai's shoulder. "I couldn't save my daughter, but maybe I can help save yours, back on Europa." Hannah was beginning to implement more advanced strategies. She organized the humans into work groups that shared resources and protected each other from guard harassment. When one prisoner got sick, the others would take turns caring for them. When someone's spirit was breaking, the group would rally around them with stories and hope. The guards began to notice that their psychological tactics weren't working as well. The humans weren't breaking down individually as expected. Instead, they were becoming more unified and determined. Commander Vex started assigning harsher punishments, but somehow the human prisoners always seemed to enjoy them together. "Something's wrong," Guard Captain Zoth reported to his commander. "These humans should be broken by now. Instead, they're getting stronger." Commander Vex's tentacles writhed with anger. "Then we'll have to try harder methods. Reduce their food rations by half. Cut their exercise time. Show them what real suffering looks like." But Hannah had been expecting this escalation. She gathered her fellow prisoners in the exercise yard, their breath forming clouds in the frozen air as she spoke quietly. "They're going to make things worse for us," she warned. "But remember, every day we survive here is another day closer to justice. Every day we stay strong together is a victory they can't take away." As the months passed, word of the human prisoners' resilience began to spread through the galactic prison network. Other species started to take notice of how the humans supported each other, how they refused to give up hope even in the darkest circumstances. Some alien prisoners even began asking to be moved to the human section, preferring solidarity over comfort. 3 years had passed since Hannah's imprisonment, and Ty had transformed from a frightened boy into a focused young man with fire in his eyes. His once soft features had sharpened, and his hands moved across computer interfaces with the precision of a master hacker. The small apartment he shared with his uncle had become a high-tech command center, filled with screens displaying data streams from across the galaxy. Bo watched with pride as his young student navigated through the Galactic Tribunal's supposedly secure database. The old man's fingers weren't as quick as they used to be, but his mind remained sharp as a laser blade. Together, they had spent countless nights breaking through firewalls and encryption protocols that would have stunned professional cybersecurity teams. There, Ty whispered, pointing at the holographic display floating between them. Case File 7432, another human colony defender sentenced by Judge Core. His voice carried a mixture of excitement and anger as he pulled up the details. Captain Cho Min from the Kepler 440 to mining dispute, sentenced to 15 years for interference with lawful business operations. Bo leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the data streams. What was his crime? He prevented Bluxian Mining Corp from dumping toxic waste into the colony's water supply, Ty replied, his fingers dancing across the keyboard to access more files. The company claimed they had proper permits, but Cho Min proved the documents were forged. When Judge Core demanded an apology for false accusations, Cho Min refused. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. File after file showed the same story playing out across dozens of star systems. Human defenders protecting their colonies from environmental destruction, illegal mining operations, and corporate exploitation. Judge Core always demanding public apologies that would humiliate humans and legitimize the corporation's actions, and when the humans refused to apologize for doing what was right, Core would send them to the most brutal prisons in the galaxy. Look at this one, Ty said, pulling up another case. Commander Parkey from the Titan base incident. She stopped Bluxian forces from stealing medical supplies during a plague outbreak. Core sentenced her to 25 years when she wouldn't apologize for a theft of corporate property. Bo's hands clenched into fists as he watched the evidence pile up. It's not just corruption, he muttered. It's systematic oppression. They're trying to break human resistance by targeting our leaders and heroes. The investigation had started small, with Ty simply trying to understand why his mother had been sentenced so harshly. But as they dug deeper into the tribunal's records, they uncovered a conspiracy that reached across the galaxy. Shell companies with Bluxian connections were buying mining rights to planets with human colonies. When the humans resisted, convenient legal cases would appear before Judge Core's tribunal. The pattern repeated over and over, like a machine designed to crush human independence. We need help, Bo said finally, leaning back in his chair. This is bigger than just your mother's case. We need someone with the resources to investigate properly and the platform to expose the truth. That's when they thought of Yundar, the famous investigative journalist whose exposes had brought down corrupt officials across multiple star systems. She worked for the Galactic Truth Network, one of the few news organizations that wasn't owned by corporate interests. Her reputation for fearless reporting had made her enemies among the powerful, but it had also made her a beacon of hope for those seeking justice. Contacting her wasn't easy. Journalists of her caliber received thousands of messages daily, and most never got past her screening system. But Bo had an idea, using his old connections from his programming days. He managed to trace one of DA's private communication channels, one she used for receiving tips from whistleblowers. The message they sent was simple but powerful. Judge Core has been systematically imprisoning human heroes to help mining corporations steal our war. LES, we have proof. 3 days later, DA's encrypted response arrived. Meet me at the Orion Cafe on Luna Station. Come alone. Bring everything. The journey to Luna Station took 18 hours on a commercial transport. Tai had never been off Earth before, and despite the serious nature of their mission, he couldn't help but stare in wonder at the massive space station orbiting the moon. Ships from dozens of different species docked at the station's many ports, their hulls gleaming in the reflected light of Earth's blue marble. The Orion Cafe was tucked away in a quiet section of the station, far from the main commercial areas. It was the kind of place where people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. Yunda was already waiting in a corner booth, her sharp eyes taking in everything round her. She was smaller than Tai had expected, but there was an intensity about her that made her seem larger than life. "You're younger than I thought," she said as Tai slid into the booth across from her. "But age doesn't matter if you have the truth." She activated a small device that would scramble any listening devices in the area. "Show me what you found." For the next 2 hours, Tai laid out everything they had discovered, the pattern of cases, the corporate connections, the systematic targeting of human defenders. Da listened intently, occasionally asking questions, or requesting additional details. Her expression grew darker as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. "This is explosive," she said finally, reviewing the data on her secure tablet. "But it's also dangerous. Judge Core has friends in high places, and the mining corporations have unlimited resources. They'll try to destroy anyone who threatens them. My mother is rotting in prison for doing the right thing," Tai replied, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I don't care about the danger." Da studied the young man's face, seeing something that reminded her of herself at that age. "I believe you, but we need more than just patterns and circumstantial evidence. We need smoking gun proof that even Core's allies can't ignore or explain away." "What kind of proof?" Tai asked. "Communications," Da replied. "Internal messages between Core and the corporations, financial records showing payments, something that proves direct coordination." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I have sources inside the tribunal system, but accessing Core's private files will be extremely dangerous. If we're caught, we'll all end up in prison cells next to your mother." Tai thought about his mother, freezing in that cell on Europa while corrupt officials grew, rich from human suffering. He thought about all the other heroes imprisoned for refusing to apologize for their courage. The decision was easy. "Tell me what you need," he said. Da smiled for the first time since they'd met. "I need a hacker who can break into systems that aren't supposed to exist. Someone young enough to be underestimated and smart enough to succeed." She extended her hand across the table. "Welcome to the most important investigation of your life, Kim Tai." As they shook hands, security cameras throughout the station recorded the moment. Neither of them knew that within hours, their images would be flagged by automated systems connected to Bloxian intelligence networks. The hunt for the truth had begun. But so had the hunt for those seeking it. The war for justice was about to begin in earnest, fought not with weapons and ships, but with data streams and encrypted communications. And at the center of it all was a 15-year-old boy who refused to let his mother's sacrifice be in vain. The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. Galactic Standard Time, when Tai's fingers finally cracked through the last layer of Judge Core's personal security system. The young hacker had been working for 18 straight hours, surviving on energy drinks and determination. His eyes burned from staring at holographic displays. But the adrenaline kept him focused as encrypted files began downloading to his secure drives. "Bo, wake up," Ty whispered urgently to the old man sleeping in the corner chair. I'm actually in his private system." Bo jolted awake, his experienced eyes immediately focusing on the streams of data flowing across the screens. "What are you seeing?" "Everything," Ty breathed, hardly believing it himself. "Private messages, financial records, meeting logs. It's all here." His hands trembled slightly as he opened the first batch of communications between Judge Core and the executives of Bloxian Mining Corp. The messages were worse than anything they had imagined. Core's words dripped with contempt and hatred for humanity, revealing a conspiracy that reached deep into the highest levels of galactic government. In one particularly damning exchange, Mining Corp CEO Vex High had written, "The human colonies on Sector 7 are resisting our expansion. We need legal cover to remove them." Core's reply was chilling. "Send me the colony defender files. I'll manufacture charges that will stick once their leaders are imprisoned. The colonies will crumble like sandcastles." But the most shocking revelation came in a message dated just 3 days before Hannah's trial. Core had written to his co-conspirators, "These humans are like insects. Crush their leaders, take their worlds." The Lee woman's refusal was perfect. "Makes her look defiant while we steal Proxima 7. Her pride will cost her everything, and will be richer for it." Ty's hands clenched into fists as he read the words. This wasn't just corruption. It was a calculated plan to destroy human resistance to corporate theft. His mother hadn't just been a victim. She had been specifically targeted because her courage made her dangerous to their schemes. "There's more," Bo said grimly, pointing to another file. "Look at this financial data." The payment records showed millions of galactic credits flowing from various mining corporations directly into accounts controlled by Judge Core. Each payment was timed to coincide with major rulings that favored corporate interests over human rights. The pattern was so obvious that even a child could see the corruption. Within hours, Yunda had verified the authenticity of the files through her network of forensic experts. The journalist's secure communication channels buzzed with activity as she coordinated with news outlets across the galaxy. This wasn't just a story. It was an earthquake that would shake the foundations of galactic justice. "We need to be careful about how we release this," Dar warned during an encrypted video. If we just dumped everything at once, Core's allies might find ways to discredit it or distract from the main story." Instead, they crafted a strategic release plan. The first wave would be the most damaging audio recordings, played in full without editing or commentary. Let Core's own words condemn him. The financial evidence would follow. Then the broader conspiracy involving other officials and corporations at exactly noon on a Tuesday. Every major news network in the galaxy received the same data package. The recordings began playing simultaneously across thousands of worlds, in dozens of languages, reaching billions of sentient beings. The impact was immediate and devastating on Earth. Crowds gathered round public screens in Times Square, watching in stunned silence as Judge Core's voice filled the air with his hateful words about humanity. When the recordings finished, the silence lasted only a moment before angry roars erupted from the assembled humans. Similar scenes played out across human colonies throughout the galaxy. On New Tokyo, workers abandoned their jobs to march on the local tribunal building. On Kepler Station, human residents surrounded the Bloxian embassy, demanding answers. The anger wasn't just about Hannah's case anymore. It was about decades of systematic oppression finally being exposed. But the most surprising reaction came from alien species who had previously remained neutral. The Altarian Council issued an immediate statement condemning Kor's words and demanding a full investigation. The crystalline beings of Centauri Prime, known for their logical approach to politics, declared that the recordings revealed unacceptable bias that undermines the foundation of galactic justice. Even more shocking was the response from some Bluxian colonies on the mining world of Titan's Edge. Bluxian workers who had witnessed the environmental destruction of human worlds joined the protests. A group of young Bluxian activists released their own statement. Judge Kor does not speak for our species. His hatred shames us all. The Galactic Council found itself facing the biggest crisis in its 500-year history. Emergency sessions were called as member species demanded immediate action. The usually calm chambers of the council became scenes of heated debate as representatives argued over how to respond to the revelations. Admiral X of the Altarian Defense Force stood before the assembly, his 8 arms gesturing emphatically as he spoke. If Judge Kor could systematically corrupt cases involving humans, how can we trust any of his rulings? How many innocent beings from all our species have suffered under his prejudice? The question sent shockwaves through the council as representatives began demanding reviews of all cases Kor had overseen during his 20-year career. The scope of potential corruption was staggering. Meanwhile, on the luxury worlds where corporate executives lived in comfort, panic was setting in. Emergency board meetings were called as companies scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Stock prices from mining corporations crashed as investors fled, wiping out billions in market value within hours. CEO of Ex-Higher Bluxian Mining Corp tried to hold a press conference to deny the allegations, but protesters surrounded the corporate headquarters. His prepared statement was drowned out by chants of justice for Hannah and end corporate tyranny. The most powerful moment came when the recordings reached Frost Prison on Europa. Through smuggled communication devices, the human prisoners heard Judge Kor's own words admitting to their persecution. The sound of their tormentor's voice, filled with hatred and contempt, sparked something deeper than anger. It sparked unbreakable resolve. Park Jin stood in the frozen exercise yard, addressing his fellow prisoners as the recordings played from hidden speakers. He called us insects, he said, his breath forming clouds in the bitter cold. But insects can swarm. Insects can bring down giants. Within 24 hours of the first broadcast, the recordings had been viewed over 10 billion times across the galactic network. Remix versions appeared with translations in every major language. Artists created powerful visual accompaniments showing the contrast between Kor's luxury and the suffering of his victims. The phrase "these humans are like insects" became a rallying cry for the oppressed across the galaxy. Alien species facing their own struggles with corporate exploitation adopted the phrase, turning Kor's words of hatred into a symbol of resistance. On Earth, Tai watched the global reaction from his small apartment, hardly believing that his late-night hacking had triggered such a massive response. News reporters were calling it the Kor recording scandal, and legal experts predicted it would lead to the complete restructuring of the galactic justice system. Your mother would be proud, Nam Bo said, placing a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder. You've given her the greatest gift possible, the truth. As protests continued to spread across the galaxy and calls for justice grew louder, it became clear that there would be no going back. The corruption had been exposed, and the galaxy demanded accountability. Judge Kor's own words had become the weapon that would destroy everything he had built through decades of systematic oppression. The revolution had begun, sparked by the courage of one woman who refused to apologize for doing what was right, and carried forward by a son who refused to let her sacrifice be forgotten. The leaked recordings spread across the galactic network like wildfire through dry grass. Within 6 hours, every major news station was broadcasting Kor's hateful words. His voice, full of contempt and cruelty, echoed through homes and offices on thousands of worlds. The blue-scaled judge's own words condemned him more powerfully than any prosecutor ever could. On the Galactic Council's central station, emergency sessions were called as protests erupted across human colonies. Ships filled with angry demonstrators surrounded tribunal buildings, demanding justice. Even alien species that had remained neutral began questioning Corps' past decisions involving their own people. Admiral Dex of the Altarian Defense Force was the first high-ranking official to speak out. If Judge Corps could corrupt human cases so easily, how many of our own people suffered under his bias? The eight-armed admiral's statement triggered a flood of similar questions from other species. At his private mansion on the luxury moon of Titan's Paradise, Judge Corps watched his empire crumble in real time. His tentacles writhed frantically as he tried to contact his allies in the mining corporations, but their communication channels had gone dark. The corporate executives who had paid him millions of credits were now scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. Sir, his personal assistant, a nervous Voxian with silver skin, approached carefully. The Galactic Council has issued an arrest warrant. Security forces are surrounding the estate. Through his mansion's crystal windows, Corps could see the sleek shapes of Council enforcement ships descending from the starfilled sky. Their blue energy beams cut through the darkness, creating a containment field around his property. There would be no escape. The arrest was broadcast live across the galaxy. Corps, once so proud and powerful in his judge's robes, was led away in energy restraints by a team of multi-species officers. His blue scales had turned pale with fear, and his tentacles hung limp round his head. The sight of the corrupt judge's downfall brought cheers from humans and aliens alike. On Europa, in the frozen halls of Frost Prison, the news reached the inmates through smuggled communication devices. The human prisoners could hardly believe what they were hearing. After years of suffering under the brutal conditions, justice was finally coming for their tormentor. Hannah stood in her cell, still wearing the thin prison uniform that had been her only clothing for 3 long years. But now her eyes burned with hope instead of despair. Around her, Park Jin and Osu were embracing, tears freezing on their faces in the cold air. "They're releasing all of Corps' victims," Park Jin said, his voice breaking with emotion. "We're going home." The prison transport ships arrived within hours, their sleek hulls cutting through Europa's eternal night. But these weren't the grim prisoner transport vessels that had brought them here. These were luxury liners sent by the Galactic Council as an apology, equipped with medical facilities and heated cabins. As the airlocks opened and the freed prisoners stepped aboard, they were greeted by Council medical teams and representatives from their home worlds. Many of the humans broke down crying as they felt warm air on their skin for the first time in years. Hannah was among the last to board, making sure all her fellow prisoners were safely aboard first. As she stepped into the heated cabin, she was handed a communication device. "For you," the ship's captain said gently. From Earth, Ty's face appeared on the small screen, older now and taller, but still her beloved son. The 3 years had changed him from a boy into a young man, but his eyes still held the same love and determination she remembered. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying across the void between worlds, "I'm coming to meet you at Luna Station. I never stopped believing in you." The journey to Luna Station took 2 days, during which Hannah and the other freed prisoners received medical treatment and counseling. The prison's cold had damaged their bodies, but their spirits remained unbroken. If anything, their shared suffering had made them stronger and more united than ever. Luna Station had been transformed for their arrival. Banners celebrating their freedom hung from every corridor, and representatives from across the galaxy had come to apologize for the injustice they had suffered, but Hannah only had eyes for one person. Ty stood at the docking bay entrance, now taller than his mother and wearing the blue uniform of the Galactic Academy's computer science program. Behind him stood Nambo, older but still sharp-eyed, and journalist Yundar, whose investigation had made this moment possible. Mother and son ran toward each other across the polished floor of the station. When they embraced, 3 years of separation melted away in an instant. Hannah held her son tight, feeling how much he had grown and changed during their time apart. "I never stopped believing in you, Mom," Ty whispered into her ear. "And I never stopped fighting for you." "I know," Hannah replied, tears streaming down her face. "I could feel your strength even in that frozen cell. It kept me warm when nothing else could." The investigation's aftermath sent shockwaves through the entire galactic justice system. Dozens of corrupt officials were arrested, and hundreds of wrongful convictions were overturned. The mining corporations involved in the conspiracy faced massive fines and criminal charges. Most importantly, the Galactic Council implemented new oversight systems to prevent such abuse from happening again. Hannah was offered her choice of positions in the reform system. She chose to lead the newly created Human Protection Fleet, a military organization dedicated to defending human colonies from corporate exploitation and alien aggression. Her first act as admiral was to establish a new code of conduct that put the protection of innocent life above all other considerations. Judge Kor's trial was swift and decisive. Faced with overwhelming evidence of his corruption, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in Frost Prison, the same facility where he had sent so many innocent humans. The irony was not lost on anyone, especially the Bloxian guards who now found themselves serving a life sentence prisoner instead of commanding one. The former judge's cell was the same type he had assigned to human prisoners, cold and barely habitable, but unlike the humans who had endured his cruelty with dignity and mutual support, Kor spent his days alone, his tentacles withering in the frozen air as he contemplated the justice he had finally received. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly healed from the wounds of systematic corruption. The Human Protection Fleet became one of the most respected military organizations in known space, with Admiral Hannah leading missions to protect colonies and investigate corporate wrongdoing. At the Galactic Academy graduation ceremony, Admiral Hannah sat in the front row wearing her dress uniform decorated with medals for courage and service. On the stage, her son Ty stood with his graduating class, having earned the highest honors in cybersecurity and galactic law. As she watched him receive his diploma, Hannah remembered that cold day in court when Judge Kor had demanded her apology. She had refused then, knowing it would cost years of her life. But looking at her son now, successful and proud, she knew she had made the right choice. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to apologize for doing what was right. Sometimes standing up for your principles, even when it seemed hopeless, was the only way to change the world. The boy who had once pressed his face against the observation deck glass, watching his mother being dragged away, was now a man ready to carry on her legacy of justice and courage. The galaxy was a better place because one woman had refused to back down, and one son had refused to give up hope. The end.